There are several reasons why this offering should please picturegoers, especially those who enjoy the kind that are strong and virile. To begin with, it is full of high-speed action. Again, due to the logical development of the story, it keeps one in continual suspense. Further, it contains no gruesome or repulsive situations. Motion Picture News wrote that about 1919's The False Faces, one of the opening films of the 2025 edition of the Columbus Picture Show. Hello everyone and welcome back to the still Ohio-bound theater of the Golden Silent Films podcast, and an extra special how do you do to all the fine folks walking out of the 1:15 screening of The False Faces here at the Columbus Moving Picture Show. That's right, this is a special Columbus Moving Picture Show special edition of the podcast, where we are releasing this episode at the exact moment the movie ends. So it's a feature of espionage and Lon Chaney for those in attendance, and if you aren't at this classic movie convention, this will still be a fun and fascinating adventure to go on. Before we disguise ourselves in movie minutia, let's talk about the usual Golden Silent Films podcast social media outlets. As usual, head on over to Golden Silence Cast on Instagram for up-to-date info on this little podcast. You can also find us on Bluesky again at Golden Silence Cast. And for all of you fine folks out there on X or Twitter, just follow at Golden Silence 1, or simply search Golden Silence Cast and we should pop up. All of these screen names and sites will be in the episode description in case you're interested in checking us out. We would love to have you floating along with us on this adventure. At both social spaces, you'll get behind-the-scenes pics and info, upcoming episode reveals, and other fun film-related materials. And always, you'll get cool photos of our easily recognizable podcasts, Gizmo and Soda. Also, if you're listening to this program on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or Apple Music, leave reviews, ratings, or if you're feeling especially frisky, maybe both. Our show has been around for nearly 5 years, and we have only gotten 18 reviews in that time on iTunes. We would love to see that number keep growing, and you awesome silent film fans out there can make it happen. All of those ratings and reviews help so much. So live your best review leaving life and help our show grow and reach all of those fellow silent film fans out there. Dropping those reviews gives us more exposure in the world of podcast and lets us know how we can improve the show. As always, we are grateful for the feedback and always want to bring you the best show humanly possible. And do subscribe to the Golden Silent Films podcast. While our output can be a little bit sketchy and mysterious, if you're subscribed, you will never miss an episode, and the moment that new content drops, it'll go straight to your listening device of choice. We are smack dab in our 5th season and don't want you to miss out on a single moment. And we would be remiss if we didn't mention our YouTube channel and its exclusive silent film content. Episodes of the podcast are uploaded there, as well as new and exclusive short-form content. We want our subscriber numbers to grow there and hope that special videos, like our first, Mabel's Willful Way and Adora Park, will be enough to get you to check us out on that streaming platform. Whether you are catching new episodes or you want to relive past movie discussions, just search for the Golden Silent Films podcast and we will pop right up for you. While we're talking about YouTube, please do us a solid. Click on over and like and subscribe. We hear it's what all the cool YouTubers are asking for. And if I remember correctly, also hit that notification bell. It's all about the engagement and the algorithms with this show. So thank you all so very much for supporting us on all of our various platforms. So one of the coolest parts of attending the Columbus Moving Picture Show are the screenings. And one of the reasons those particular screenings can be so cool are the introductions various folks in the know give to the audience to set the scene for the film about to be shown. Since I will be in attendance, I wanted to take the opportunity to have a little fun and turn the idea of a movie intro on its head. So what you fine listeners are getting here is our very first post-show movie discussion. A reverse film introduction, if there even is such a thing. So for all of you con-goers just leaving the screening of The False Faces in Columbus, welcome to the world of the Lone Wolf. And if you're sitting at home enjoying this episode, we also want to welcome you into the world of the Lone Wolf. On the topic of spying, everyone at the con just left the screening featuring a beautiful and pristine print of The False Faces. This is a common occurrence at the Columbus Moving Picture Show, and one of the great benefits of attending. You see some really classic films in some of the highest quality available, and The False Faces is no exception. You also got great film accompaniment by either Dr. Philip Carley or David Drazen. If you aren't in Ohio at this time, fear not, because there are still some great ways to get your silent espionage fix. As always, you can do a simple search into YouTube and more than a few options should pop up for you. Being the physical media nerds we are here at the podcast home office, we had to make the purchase and bring home the Alpha Home Entertainment version on DVD. While the picture quality isn't the best on this release, it's the price you pay when picking up Alpha Home Entertainment releases, but it's still super cool to have that movie in hand and not be dependent on the interweb. On the topic of physical media also, I have to shout out the book The Films of Lon Chaney by Lon Chaney expert Michael F. Blake. It has a lot of great info on every Chaney film, which is especially great in this case, since The False Faces doesn't have a lot of documentation or a lot of love in the mainstream silent film world. So, this gave me a little bit, at least, something to talk about, something to chew on. But regardless, Blake came through in the pinch, and if you want to learn more about Lon Chaney, he has so many great books about him. So with the scene set, let's start this actual film discussion with a bit of a pre-show warning. For a handful of reasons, there won't be a ton of Lon Chaney talk here. That is for a couple of reasons. First, to talk about the life of Lon Chaney, that's a bit of a heavy, deep topic worthy of its own episode, or episodes. And there are so many great books by the aforementioned Michael F. Blake that really cover it in depth and really give you a lot to sink your teeth into. But this film, while Lon Chaney is in it, it really isn't a Lon Chaney film per se. Second, we have some great Lon Chaney topics in the works for later on in this season and later on down the road. All of that is to say there will be less Chaney talk today, but fear not, because there will be more down the road. And that means, with not as much Lon Chaney talk in this episode, that means there's a lot of cool folks and stories behind this film that are worthy of our chat time. If you're a new listener to the show, this is the perfect time to bring up that we tend to take the road less traveled on the show. There's so many fascinating lives and stories out there, and so few podcast episodes to discuss them in. So, on that front, let's talk about the lone wolf of this story. That role was portrayed by Henry B. Walthall, who was born on March 16, 1878 in Shelby County, Alabama. His father was a captain in the Confederate Army. He also had a sister, Anna Mae Walthall, who would also have a decent career in the silence. The young Walthall received his formal education via private tutor. As a 20-year-old, Walthall enlisted in the 1st Alabama Regiment during the Spanish-American War. His war effort, though, did not last long. Walthall himself explains, "When a fiery youth, I enlisted as a volunteer in the Spanish-American War, but was seized with malarial fever while my regiment was in camp in Jacksonville, Florida. Soon after my recovery, the regiment was mustered out. Now, despite the war concluding, he still would serve 11 months before being discharged and returning home. With a little chunk of cash in his pocket, he decided to follow his theater ambitions and headed to New York City. It was there he hoped to make a career out of being on stage. He played small parts with the Murray Hill Theater Stock Company before joining up with the American Theater Stock Company, and soon after that, joining the Providence, Rhode Island Stock Company. Now that's all well and good, but how did the talented Walthall make the jump from stage to screen? Who better to tell that story than the man himself? Henry Walthall gave a great interview in the October 1915 edition of Motion Picture Magazine. It covered so many topics on and off screen, but in the interest of brevity and staying focused on our topic of the day, let's focus on his thoughts concerning his film career. "I guess you can lay the blame on my friend James Kirkwood for my introduction to pictures," he reminisced. "He and I had played in the same company with Henry Miller in The Great Divide, and after Henry Miller detailed me to locate Kirkwood for a part to play in a new play. I visited Jim at his apartment that night, but failed in my attempt to lure him back to the footlights. He had been engaged by D.W. Griffith to direct and appear in motion picture plays, and his staunch support of film acting and producing made quite an impression on me. Later that summer, I again visited Kirkwood at the old Biograph studio, then located on West 14th Street, New York. An introduction followed to Mr. Griffith, and he inquired of me if I would consider a part in his next photodrama. He offered me the same salary I was then receiving with Henry Miller, and I decided to enlist with Mr. Griffith's ranks. There, I think you have it all. Walthall was certainly a talent that those in his orbit recognized. D.W. Griffith once gushed, "Walthall was a rare creation of God, that mankind should appreciate and respect. In all my associations with actors, I can justly say that Henry Walthall, as a photo player, is inimitable." One of Walthall's biggest successes of his early career came in the Griffith-directed feature The Birth of a Nation. He would remain with Biograph for a year before eventually ending up with Pathé when Griffith took Biograph to the West Coast. Soon after, though, the entrepreneurial spirit embiggened the actor to look beyond just acting. Walthall explains, "Taking heart of courage, I decided to go into the producing business on my own hook, and I formed the first feature film company that was then in existence. The organization was known as the Union Feature Film Company. The venture was not successful, however, and I again became associated with Griffith in the Biograph Company." Walthall continued working in films through the 1920s, appearing in The Plastic Age with Gilbert Roland and Clara Bow. He portrayed Roger Chillingsworth in Victor Sjöström's 1926 adaptation of The Scarlet Letter with Lillian Gish, and that would be a role he reprised in the 1934 film adaptation of the novel. Now, this is a perfect segue into his career in the 30s. According to his obit in the New York Times, we read, "With the advent of sound pictures and the consequent demand for players who could read lines, Walthall dropped the vaudeville work to which he had turned, and he went back to Hollywood, not as a star as he had been, but as an actor who can make character studies stand out." It was a great role and standout performance in director John Ford's 1934 film Judge Priest, starring Will Rogers, that led to a golden period of his career. In 1935, he portrayed Dr. Manette in A Tale of Two Cities, starring Ronald Colman. In 1936, he appeared as Marcel in The Devil Doll and as Captain Buchanan in the American Civil War drama Hearts in Bondage. It was during filming of his final role in the film China Clipper that his health took a turn for the worst. He was actually quite the trooper, though, since he was gravely ill during the film's production. Exhausted from months of uninterrupted film work, Walthall collapsed on the Warner Brothers set after completing his scenes in the film China Clipper, in which he portrayed an airplane inventor. The New York Times would write, "His growing popularity was in part responsible for his death, for he had worked almost unceasingly the past 6 months." He entered the Pasteur Sanitarium at Monrovia, California, shortly after and died of intestinal illness 3 weeks later, on June 17, 1936, at the age of 60. Walthall has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, located at 6201 Hollywood Boulevard, and his final resting place is in the uber-popular Hollywood Forever Cemetery. An actor can really only do so much without a director getting the most out of his cast and crew. And as you'll learn later, Walthall and the film's director Irvin Willat would have a, let's say, interesting working relationship, but we're getting a bit ahead of ourselves. Irvin V. Willat was born on November 18, 1890 in Stamford, Connecticut, or Atlanta, Georgia. I read conflicting reports, so we'll leave it up to you, the listeners, to decide. From an early age, Willat was interested in film and the photographic world. Like many folks, he found his inspiration on the silver screen. Willat explains, "I was running a card printing press on the streets in Atlanta, Georgia, and it was near the front of a theater. I used to get to go in the theater whenever I wanted to. So I watched the pictures and I saw, among others, a picture in color. It was a religious story, probably the life of Christ, made in Italy and hand-colored. Unbelievable but true, each frame hand-colored. That impressed me very much, and I became interested in photography." Not long after, Willat would make his way to St. Petersburg, Florida, to visit his brother Edwin. This trip provided the next step in turning Irvin into a real-life directorial prodigy. You see, Edwin was an owner and operator of a portrait studio. In his time as a Florida man, Willat learned a great deal about being behind a camera. He, Edwin, knew the chemistry of photography. I learned a great deal quickly because he could give it to me more condensed than if he took a course as he did, the director would say. The theme of learning from his brothers would continue a year later, except this time a little further north, New York to be exact, and this time Irvin would be taking notes from his older brother Carl Alfred Willat, a tried-and-true motion picture man known in the business as Doc. So when I say Irvin's brother Carl Alfred was a player in the biz, I am absolutely not even close to kidding. According to noted historian Kevin Brownlow, in an article for silentfilm.org, we read, "An exhibitor in 1905, Doc Willat joined Vitagraph and brought in such names as Maurice Costello and John Bunny. He helped reorganize the New York Motion Picture Company and in 1911 became its general manager, overseeing its labs and producing brands that included Bronco and 101 Bison. He built and operated the Willat Studio and labs at Fort Lee, and in 1916 became a vital figure at Technicolor as managing producer. George Eastman said that Doc Willat did more for the technical advancement of the motion picture than any other man." Now that's a pretty solid person to sit under the learning tree of, and you can definitely see how this experience would help Irvin Willat become such a tech guru and wizard of the era. Also, during this early era, Willat would dabble a bit in front of the camera with a handful of acting roles as well. Not too shabby of a lineage for getting into the moving pictures, right? Doc needed a photography veteran who was well acquainted with the darkrooms and processing of film. Being a student and an assistant wouldn't be the endpoint, though, for his young brother Irvin. By 1915, Willat was behind the camera, this time capturing moving images himself. I'll let the man himself take you behind the scenes of his first film action. Irvin recounts, "The first scenes I ever directed were on the Mary Miles Minter picture, Always in the Way, from 1915. We were running behind schedule, so in order to get done, J. Searle Dawley says, 'Irvin, you take a camera.' We had 2 cameramen, myself and another, and he told me what the scenes were, and I shot them." Later, Willat found his way to Keystone, where he proved to be a pioneer of the world of trick photography. Thomas Ince would then see the potential in the young film guy and place him in charge of the Ince Triangle photographic department. It was in this role that Willat made the first decorative art title for motion pictures. He also did all the special photography in the 1916 Thomas Ince production of Civilization. Willat's first official directorial gig came in 1917 with the Ince Triangle Fine Arts melodrama, In Slumberland. As his career behind the camera progressed, Willat grew into a bit of a harsh boss. Little rough edges around him, I guess you could say. He had little time for jokes or being silly or incompetent. He was on the set to work, and he would not suffer fools lightly. What Willat lacked in bubbly personality, though, he made up for with knowledge. He knew every in and out of each step the film went through, from start to finish. Now, Robert S. Burchard, who interviewed Willat in 1971, writes, "Willat was not an easy man to get to know. He was gruff, demanding, and not shy about shouting his outrage at long smoldering injustices he perceived. But if you made the effort to get to beyond the hard-boiled facade, Willat proved to be shy, self-doubting, sensitive, and caring. It became easy to see why so many of his associates from the early days had remained loyal friends and often came to Willat for advice and help." This interview with the director from the publication Film History, Volume 12 from 2000, is an awesome read and really takes you on a journey from the earliest days of cinema. It's a super in-depth talk from a 1971 interview and is chock full of behind-the-scenes stories about some of the biggest names in the business. Also, amongst behind-the-scenes stories, if you are more into the tech side of how movies were made back in the day, this interview is also for you. There's so much great technical know-how on display from the director. You can see why he was such an important cog in early filmmaking. So, do yourself a favor and give it a read. It really is phenomenal. Now let's talk about some of Willat's films that stood out to me as I looked over his filmography. The year 1919 was a pretty cool one. In addition to directing Lon Chaney in The False Faces, he was also at the helm of The Grimm Game, which starred legendary escapologist and magician Harry Houdini for famous players Lasky. The picture featured Harry Houdini, who told me, "I thought I was a magician until I met you, because of all the things we could do in the camera that he would never think of. He was no actor, you know. He was a practical man, but a very personable fellow," Willat would later say. He was a trusted hand by many of the biggest film companies in the world at the time. As sound started creeping into the movie landscape, Willat directed the silent feature The Michigan Kid in 1928. This Universal Pictures production was released on June 30th and starred Conrad Nagel and Renee Adoré This one stands out because it was one that Willat himself referenced as one of his best works. In addition to directorial duties, Willat also provided some contributions to the film's script. So, with some biographies out of the way, let's take a step back from the directorial talk and look at how the False Faces came into existence. And surprise, surprise, if you were an avid reader back in the 1900s and the 1920s, then you were well aware of this story and its novel origins. As was mentioned earlier, this film is an adaptation of an incredibly popular series of novels. The author behind the Lone Wolf series was Louis Joseph Vance. He created the popular character Michael Lanyard, a criminal-turned-detective known as the Lone Wolf. And when I say popular, I ain't kiddin'. That intellectual property following the exploits of Lanyard was featured in 8 books and 24 films between 1914 and 1949, whilst also appearing in radio and television series. The False Faces was the second novel in the series. The first film adaptation of it came in 1917 with The Lone Wolf, directed by Herbert Brennan. In this first iteration, Michael Lanyard, the Lone Wolf, was played by Burt Lytle. That earlier film almost shared a title with the film we're about to talk about today. The film's working title, in fact, was The Lone Wolf as well. According to noted Lon Chaney biographer and expert Michael F. Blake, we get a little peek behind the business curtain on how this film came into being. We read, "The July 13, 1918 issue of Motion Picture News announced that producer Thomas H. Ince had purchased the rights to the Louis Joseph Vance novel. Irvin Willat and Jerome Storm were announced as co-directors of the production, which was scheduled to begin principal photography the third week of August." Blake continues, "Production was delayed until October 1918, and Willat was given credit as sole director. So, with our reconnaissance and undercover cinematic intel acquired, let's sneak into the Columbus Moving Picture Show feature presentation and discuss a Thomas H. Ince presentation starring Henry B. Walthall in False Faces, picturized by Irvin V. Willat. The False Faces wasn't Irvin Willat's first book-to-screen project. Way back in 1914, Willat served as cinematographer on the film adaptation of Uncle Tom's Cabin, which was directed by William Robert Daley. He also would direct an adaptation of Zane Grey's novel, The Heritage of the Desert, and that, folks, is just bookmarking a couple of his book-to-film bona fides. The film tells us that this story focuses on the further career and adventures of the Lone Wolf. Willat wasted no time in dropping the viewer into the sheer terror and violence of World War I. Midnight on the Western Front, with the armies of civilization beating back the wolf hordes of a blood-crazed king, we read. We see explosions and gunfire, dead bodies in the trenches. It is really well done and sets the tone for the film that is to come. It's pretty realistic stuff and looks like it was made on a pretty grand scale. Soldiers run, fight for their lives, explosions, bombs go off. It really is terrifying. With the spotlight searching for the living, while the souls of the dead rise among the star shells towards the shadowy sky, we read. We find ourselves on the British front line on the edge of no man's land, where the legions of death march ceaselessly to the drumfire of a million guns. Michael Lanyard, played by Henry B. Walthall, known among the Paris underworld as the Lone Wolf, makes his way across the no man's land during a horrific battle. Variety, from February of 1919, gives us their take on this impressive and realistic scene in the trenches of war. The paper writes, "There is a lengthy preamble of trench stuff at the opening. It is well done, and its stretches of the waste of no man's land are very effective. The lighting here is particularly good." The Lone Wolf reaches the British trenches and is taken before an officer who turns out to be a former detective of Scotland Yard. We learn the two have a history, and soon Lanyard is enlisted in the Allied Secret Service. You see, the Lone Wolf was an American embedded as a spy inside Germany, and he has info for the Allies. He tells the officer that Karl Ekstrom lives. It is here that he is given the job of tracking down German spies. He is particularly interested in catching Karl Ekstrom, played here by the legendary Lon Chaney, the man of 1,000 faces. Why might the master thief have a beef with a German commander? Let's let the Lone Wolf explain for himself. He says, "Exiled, I went to Belgium and there lived peaceably with my sister, a widow striving to support her child. Then the war, and Ekstrom leading a band of blonde beasts. Those beasts murdered Lanyard's niece and left his sister to die of starvation during the German march through northern France. Lanyard finishes by saying, "By the grave of those poor creatures, I vowed to devote the rest of my life to the extermination of Ekstrom and his kind." He explains to the British officer that under an alias he was able to infiltrate the German Secret Service and learned that Ekstrom was leaving for the United States on a mission for the Wilhelmstrasse, which I believe was the German government entity, but I could be totally wrong. I know it's some sort of German branch of government or Secret Service or something. Now, that intel was all the Major needed to set the Lone Wolf on a spy mission to stop Ekstrom and the Germans. Lanyard follows Ekstrom to America, booking passage on the SS Assyrian. We learn that this voyage is fraught with many naval dangers, namely enemy submarines. On board, in another change of identity, we see Lanyard is now Duchemin with the false papers to prove it. Also on board the boat is Cecilia Brooke, who is carrying a cylinder containing secrets of vital importance to the Allies. We find out that she and the Lone Wolf have adjoining rooms. We eventually get an accidental meeting of the two where she hands Lanyard that cylinder, which has been disguised as a cigarette. She tells him to keep it secret no matter what, even if it costs him his life. Also, Cecilia Brooke here is played by Mary Anderson. Over the course of a 7-year career, the Brooklyn native appeared in over 77 films. Though not a long career, she definitely got the most out of her short time. She would work for such notable companies as Ince Paramount and famous players Lasky. Also on board the ship is a group of German spies under the command of one person who has infiltrated the actual crew of the Assyrian. Surprise, surprise. You know who it is? It is Ekstrom. This is a cinematically historic moment in the film. As we find out Ekstrom is undercover as a member of the crew, we watch him put on a fake beard and mustache. Michael Blake explains, in one sequence, Chaney dons a false beard, the only time Chaney was photographed in moving pictures applying makeup to his face. Now, spoiler alert, bit of a spoiler alert here. Are you curious as to what was being covertly carried in the counterfeit cigarette? We were too, but unfortunately, you're not going to get an answer. It is merely the MacGuffin of this little cinematic adventure. Everyone's after it, but we don't really find out what's in it. Sorry to have ruined the end of the film. Cecilia Brooke, we read in Variety, has been entrusted to carry an important package to the head of the English Secret Service in this country. Just why is it important is never disclosed during the story, but it must have been a cuckoo judging from the amount of trouble that it stirred up. She entrusts the cylinder to Lanyard, remember, but Ekstrom learns of this and attacks him and steals it. Actually, leading up to this, both men play some cat-and-mouse games, trickery, hiding of the suspicious cylinder, before things really start to get out of control on the vessel. It's a really fun and oftentimes exhilarating chase that breaks out on the ship between the two. Eventually, Lanyard is overpowered and thrown overboard just as a German submarine attacks the ship. Whilst Lanyard is fighting to stay afloat in the ocean, the crowds on the ship get hysterical as the ship begins to sink after the attack. And that includes Cecilia Brooke. Our favorite industry newspaper chimes in, writing, "On the trip across, there is action, a couple of good fights, several excellent submarine shots, and finally, the sinking of a huge liner. Lanyard is saved when he is taken aboard the submarine. Being the exceptionally quick-witted master of illusion and disguise that he is, the Lone Wolf was able to convince the captain that he is, in fact, a German spy. This bit with the Lone Wolf on the sub is pretty fun on a variety of levels. First, and probably most basic, is the comedy relief of the drunk sailor talking some big talk to Lanyard about the sub's captain. Second, we get an unexpected appearance of ghosts. That's right, I said ghosts. I totally did not think this tale of espionage and action would detour into some pretty compelling specters of death, but here we are. We found out that the sub's captain was part of some high seas death and destruction himself. Not only is he an alcoholic, the sailor tells the Lone Wolf, but he is completely mad besides. It was he who, with his own hand, that launched the torpedo that sunk the Lusitania. Since then, he has been plagued by spirits of the dead, the hallucinations of a demented criminal. These hallucinations manifest themselves with the dead and dying crawling over his desk. He stands up only to have corpses wrapped in seaweed knocking at his window. Good work was done by the production folks to really give these murder victims a subtle scariness in a pretty wild and unexpected scene. Speaking of that, turning back to Michael Blake, we read, Jane Daly, who under the name Jacqueline Daly appeared as a haunting vision to the German U-boat captain, Chaney actually applied her makeup to give the appearance of a sea corpse. After some more scares and the accidental murder of a crew member, the captain happens to find out that the lone wolf is not who he says he is. He is no German spy or soldier. He goes to confront Lanyard, but the drunk sailor that Lanyard had been hanging around with finally gets the liquid courage going and shoots the captain dead before he can announce that Lanyard is a fraud. The lone wolf takes this opportunity to make his escape. The sub, though, has reached its super-duper top-secret international hiding base in Martha's Vineyard. Yep, Martha's Vineyard. Lanyard pushes ahead and eventually makes it to New York. There he finds that Ekstrom has fooled the British Secret Service into thinking that he is a British agent. He has obtained Cecilia's papers and is negotiating with their sale to a spy within the British government. I risked my life to save that cylinder and its papers from destruction, Ekstrom, under an assumed name, explains. That should deserve at least $10,000. The lone wolf, being the master thief he is hidden in the room and watching this go down in real time. The deal was made, and the cylinder and its contents are quickly locked in a hidden safe. It goes without saying, but spy movies are full of cat-and-mouse games, turns and double turns, misinformation, unreliable narrators, and various other tricks, surprises, and gimmicks. The False Faces is no different in that regard. I've kind of condensed the story down a bit for time considerations, but there really is a lot of fun back and forths, questionable loyalties, and close calls. It's an entertaining as heck film, but it doesn't really move as quick when I'm breaking it down scene by scene. So, turning back to the film, Lanyard breaks into Ekstrom's safe to recover the cylinder, but he cannot locate it. After this, Ekstrom now has Cecilia, who survived the ship attack, captured in his headquarters. This all leads to a great set piece featuring the lone wolf making a daring entry into the bad guy's skyscraper headquarters. It wasn't very long, but super cool, and involved Lanyard actually climbing down a crane and into the building. The two enemies engage in some fisticuffs before Ekstrom catches Lanyard after a really cool, hard-fought battle that destroyed a lot of classy and expensive furniture in the process. But through a ruse, Lanyard tricks Ekstrom's own men into shooting him, thinking he was the lone wolf. With the bad guys being subdued by authorities, Cecilia has one last request of the lone wolf, thinking he still has the documents from earlier. And now, monsieur, I must ask you to return to me this little cylinder I entrusted to you, she tells him. He explains the situation, but tells her to hang tight. He'll get them back. He is a master thief after all. Before we get to the conclusion of the film, let's talk about that tricky relationship between the director and star. You see, Walthall was not a man without vices and demons, and unfortunately, Irvin Willat had to work around some of those vices. Willat would explain, he was drinking at that time. I made this picture with Walthall in New York. He'd get so drunk that at the end of the picture, I couldn't get him to stand on his feet, so I had the set cut down, and he sat on a box and played the scene close up of what it was when he was standing by the window. I remember that. Burchard follows up asking, that's why he didn't go to great heights after Birth of a Nation? Willat replied, yeah, he liked liquor. A hopefully sober Walthall as Lanyard locates the cylinder on the spy Blensop, who was hiding in the Secret Service, and returns it to Cecilia. The two share a tender moment where Cecilia reveals that she knew he was the lone wolf all along. And love springs forth. And what did Cecilia Brooks do with the cylinder? The end. If you thought that was abrupt, it certainly was, and we never do find out about the fake cigarette. I really thought this film was incredibly fun. This was a wild ride from start to finish. Having never heard of it before, I was incredibly surprised how much I was into it. I was on the edge of my seat for long stretches of action. Willat had the touch of a seasoned action director, which is impressive since this was 1919 productions. It is definitely worth checking out if you have never seen it before. Even if you can't catch an original 16mm form in person with a room full of avid filmgoers, you still have to give this film a watch. It is so much fun. This movie was it was strange, though, in that it was wild to see Lon Chaney in what is basically a supporting role. I've seen many of his big hits, so I'm awfully used to seeing him front and center in their starring roles. Seeing him play the big bad to the lead actor was a fun change of pace and had me treasuring his moments on screen even more. It kind of made him I guess you could call a special attraction to the film. Speaking of old Lon, this was an interesting performance. It was not filled with the emotion and pathos of his later and greater roles. Here he is a mustache-twirling melodrama villain, albeit without the mustache, but he did have a beard, so close enough. His characterization is bad guy for sure, but still pretty one-dimensional bad guy. It suits the film, and it fits perfectly with the world that was created on screen. It just isn't an all-timer of a role for the Man of 1,000 Faces, but I will say, he still has that incredible aura and presence in this film. Now, one of the things I really dug about this film was the sheer amount of action taking place on the high seas. I am always a big sucker for seeing boats like the Assyrian out and about, and I especially any filmed submarine action from this era as well. It brought back some really fond memories of two other films we've looked at here on the podcast. Those would be 1915's The Submarine Pirates, starring Sidney Chaplin, and 1916's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. If you want to hear more about those ocean-bound adventures, you can find those episodes in our earlier seasons. They're super fun and have some really cool takes on ocean adventure. Now, we here at the podcast are also suckers for artistically and aesthetically pleasing intertitles, and this movie had some great ones. And they were of minimalist fare, to be sure, but they served to accentuate the words, but not overtake them. They weren't top-tier mega like those found in Blood and Sand, but they were definitely in that upper echelon. One knock against these intertitle art pieces were that some were a bit overused. And when I say some were a bit overused, I say one was really overused. I will see that dang cigarette intertitle in my dreams. Now, as cool as a lung dart is, seeing the same picture over and over again can be a bit much, but still, kudos to the brain trust behind those intertitles. And as an addendum to that last bit, we love the art that was actually visible. Some of the cards and intertitles were pretty tough to see, so a lot of cool stuff was more than likely missed out on, but we'll get into that picture quality momentarily. Kind of spinning things forward a little bit, I think this is a film that could really use a remake. The False Faces has a very Mission Impossible vibe to it. From disguises to action, it really lends itself to a modern reimagining. The scenes aboard the Assyrian play like something from Death of the Nile or Agatha Christie or something. There's lots of questions about identity, who to trust, who is who, and all of that would work phenomenally in a movie theater today. But I would still like it set in that 1919 time frame, of course. Now, getting back to that quality topic we talked about a second ago, I do have to say the quality of the DVD version from Alpha Video here left a little bit to be desired. To be honest, I never expect the best clarity from them, and I am just happy to be able to have the movie physically in hand. But this one in particular was pretty rough in some spots. I tend to let a lot go, but when it is super hard to do something as simple as read these beautiful intertitles, something has gone incredibly wrong. And that's not the fault of Alpha Video, I understand that. They work with the prints and copies they have, I'm sure. There was a lot of cool stuff going on screen, and it's a bit of a bummer and a letdown that so much of it is hard to see. But folks, it is not all doom and gloom for this release. The music on the DVD was fantastic and really fit the film perfectly. So that's all my thoughts, all my ideas. Let's turn to some professionals and hear their thoughts on this film. In the February 1919 edition of Photoplay magazine, we read, "Here is a continuation of the career of the Lone Wolf. Louis Joseph Vance's story, whose first, and we might say only inspired part, was done in a photoplay a year and a half ago by Herbert Brennan. False Faces runs more to the wild, rapid, and characterless incidents of mechanical melodrama, whereas The Lone Wolf was the gripping human story of a forlorn little boy who grew into manhood with a great and not wholly unjust of hate." The review continues, "In the second tale, we have wholly to do with the fights of the matured wolf with ring after ring, combination after combination of German spies and military or naval agents. As a melodrama of incident rather than character, it is technically good. Thomas H. Ince has supplied an abundant and well-ordered production. Henry Walthall is the wolf instead of Burt Lytle. Brennan's defiant outlaw and for a story of the present nature is probably better than Lytle would have been. Mary Anderson is a vivid and appealing child in an opposite assignment, and the roster of performers includes such strong masculine meat as Lon Chaney, Thornton Edwards, and William Bowman. Masculine meat, the use of that really makes me chuckle, and I will have to use that in future episodes. Masculine meat characters. Let's turn to industry paper Variety to get their opinion. Opening up the February 1919 issue, we read, Henry B. Walthall in The False Faces is the current week's attraction at the Rivoli. The feature is Ince made and released as a Paramount Artcraft special. Why a special? It's hard to define, but it is a very good picture when considered in the general run of program product. Variety continues, The False Faces is not a super production, and it does not qualify as special, but on a program it would stand out as a good picture. That is certainly not the most ringing endorsement I've ever heard. I suppose it's absolutely better than saying the movie sucked and was terrible, but that review is the 1919 version of meh. Very, tepid. Very tepid indeed, I would say. With the subterfuge behind us, it's time to find out where your favorite silent stars are laid to rest. This is the segment where we join our favorite cinematic stars and directors on the other side of the cemetery gates. The history, the art, the celebrity spectacle converge in Where Are They Now? Your guide to paying your respects to the directors that have thrilled us so much. The career of Irvin Willat was pretty prolific, especially during the Roaring '20s. He was one of the hardest working people in Hollywood, directing 24 films over the 10-year span. As far as I could see, his final film was Luck of the Roaring Camp, released on November 17, 1937. This was one of only a few sound pictures the director would ever produce. Robert S. Burchard once asked the director, "What did you think of sound? Did you think it was an improvement to pictures, or did you prefer silence?" Willat replied, "Well, let's put it this way. It's two entirely different mediums. I saw one of my pictures about a year ago, The Michigan Kid, and in my opinion, and I'm bragging, one of the best examples of the old silent pictures that I have seen. You could run it on the screen today, and you wouldn't miss a thing. But some background music behind it, and the audience would accept it just as it is, with titles and no dialogue whatsoever. But that's an entirely different medium. I can't see how anyone can say that sound isn't more important. Look at how you can cut a film out. You just make the man say, 'I'll be in New York tomorrow at 10 o'clock,' and you dissolve out, and he's in New York tomorrow at 10. You couldn't do that with silence so easily. You can chop it all up today with just a word or two. Some of that's good, and some of that's overdone. Over the course of his career, Willat worked with a definite A-list of talent. If you don't believe me, here's just a few of the names of the talent to be directed by Willat. There was podcast favorite Lila Lee, Hobart Barnsworth, Lon Chaney, B.B. Daniels, Columbus native Warner Baxter, Lois Wilson, Wallace Beery, and Harry Houdini, and that is just to name a few. It really is an impressive list. While in the prime of his career, Irvin Willat was killing it, absolutely killing it, doing big business with some really big companies. I mean, he was doing this great work with the great stars I just talked about, but unfortunately, though, that incredible run would start to slow down as the 30s came and went. According to the George Eastman Museum, in the early 1930s, Willat traveled to the South Seas with pulp novelist Gouverneur Morris to produce a series of shorts, a format that, unfortunately for Willat, would soon become obsolete due to the rising popularity of the double feature. Upon his return, Willat was reduced to working for such Poverty Row studios as Weiss Brothers Art Class Pictures, filming Damaged Lives in 1931, Crescent Pictures, filming Old Louisiana starring Rita Hayworth, and Under Strange Flags, both in 1937, and Monogram Pictures, The Luck of Roaring Camp in 1937 as well. Faced with diminishing opportunities, Willat left the industry in favor of unrelated businesses, including real estate. On the personal side of things, though, Willat married actress Billie Dove in 1923. She would later appear in several of Willat's films through the 20s before the two divorced in 1929. But it wasn't just any garden, run-of-the-mill divorce. This one had its fair share of controversy. You see, the divorce came about when Dove left Willat for Howard Hughes. Turning back to the Eastman Museum website, we read, a subsequent payment of $360,000 from Hughes, which Willat accepted, led to the perception that Willat had quote-unquote sold his wife, which, according to historian Robert Burchard, damaged the director's reputation in Hollywood. Outside of the scandalous stuff, let's look back at the later years of the director's life and his legacy in the film industry from the man himself. First, we'll look at Kevin Brownlow. In Speaking With, the director would write, I asked Willat if he had kept any films. He handed over the toss of a coin, a 1911 Imp 1 reeler with Mary Pickford and Irvin Willat as leading man. It had solidly decomposed. Little did I know, while I was talking to him about his Technicolor westerns, such as Heritage of the Desert and Wanderer of the Wasteland, both 1924, that he had had those very titles walled up in his bungalow. A fact that only came to light in 1976 after his death, when his place was demolished. Alas, these unique Technicolor films had also decomposed. Irvin Willat died on April 17, 1976, at the age of 85 in Santa Monica, California. I just do know that there's an awful lot that I've forgotten, Willat once said. You've got to forget in that many years you have other things. You see, I don't go back to the picture business except when one of you fellas come over here. None of the people around me are interested in the old pictures, and I never considered myself a good director. I was never quite satisfied with myself. I was more of a businessman, more able with the technical end than I ever was with the dramatic handling of the actors. I was never able to come up to my standards as to direction. So, the False Faces is now over, and our Columbus Moving Picture Show event schedule is crazy full, and we have a screening to get to and physical media and other trinkets to purchase, so we need to close up shop here for the moment. Whether you are here hanging out with us in Columbus or listening from a location near or far, we want to thank you for your movie discussion time with us. Did you enjoy this tale of cat and mouse? What are your favorite spy films? Have you been tracked all over the world by master thieves? Tell us your story. Are you at the convention right now? What events are on your to-do list? And more. Tell us all of that and more at the social media spots of the Golden Silent Films podcast. On that note, if you've forgotten, we are on Instagram, Bluesky, and Twitter. Let us know what you thought of this episode. What silent and silent-related movies, past or present, do you want us to look at next? Our world of silent movie knowledge and experience is constantly expanding, and we need your input for our future episodes here and beyond. You can always find us at Golden Silence Cast on Instagram and Bluesky, and Golden Silence 1 on Twitter, and now on YouTube. And again, if you want to listen to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or any other podcast outlet that allows it, subscribe, rate, and review. If you're watching on YouTube, like, subscribe, and comment. It does a lot for our visibility, and we love hearing your thoughts and ideas. We really, really appreciate all of your incredible support, and seeing how much you fine folks are listening only makes us want to make bigger and better, more epic, more adventurous episodes. So with all of that being said, thank you to all of you fine listeners for all of your fine listening. And don't forget, the silents are golden, and the talkies are just a fad. And we got movies to get to at the Columbus Moving Picture Show. See you guys. This film really exhibits that the story was never about the cylinder or the fake cigarette. It wasn't about the British Secret Service or the German Secret Service. It wasn't about terrible cruises and aggressive submarines. It wasn't about German soldiers with a knack for makeup or the thieves that hunted the German soldiers with the knack for makeup. Really, for Lanyard and Cecilia, it really was about the friends they made along the way.